What I'm going to try and do today is very briefly cover some of the background that many of you have likely already heard before relating to, Asian hornets. What are they? What are we referring to? And why are they a particular concern from a beekeeping perspective? But I'm then also going to outline the automated monitoring system that we've been working on at the University of Exeter, which really aims to use a type of artificial intelligence, specifically deep learning, to automatically detect and then raise an alert to the Asian hornet Vespa velutina when it moves into an area. Okay, so to start things off, I'll give you a sort of, I don't want to call it a rogues gallery, but a little run through of some hornet species just for familiarity. So this is a European hornet, Vespa crabro. It's a species that's native to most of Europe, including the UK. This is Vespa velutina, the yellow-legged or Asian hornet, the hornet which I'm going to be talking about primarily today, and it's also a species which is invasive in large parts of Europe, including with ingressions into the UK. Not to be confused with the giant Japanese or Asian hornet, Vespa mandarinia, seen here, a lot bigger, but confusingly also known as an Asian hornet and also invasive, although in the United States and parts of Canada. And so there's often a lot of confusion, especially in sort of popular vernacular, between these species. And it gets even more confusing when we think the European hornet is actually, its range also extends into Asia. So technically all of these could be considered Asian hornets. Anyway, one thing to note is that the European hornet in the UK is actually more likely to be this particular colour variant with this sort of yellow band on its head that gives it a more wasp-like coloration. Anyway, without making things too confusing, Vespa velutina, Asian or yellow-legged hornet, is the invasive species that we're going to be focusing on here. So Vespa velutina, a little bit of a background. The colour form that we have as the invasive colour form is Vespa velutina nigrithorax, referring to this kind of dark abdomen that it has, also with this bright orange band. And that information is useful because it tells us where in the native range of a species this colour form has really emerged from. And that's in the very north of the range, so that's parts of India, Nepal, but specifically parts of southern China. And it's really a globally invasive species at this point. So it moved into Korea on or before 2003. Then to France around 2004, likely in a shipment of either pottery or some other commercial goods. A queen was able to move in. And then it moved from Korea to Tsushima Island and then to mainland Japan as of 2012. And unfortunately, as of last year, it's found its way to the US states of Georgia and also South Carolina. And the last talk we had with the Department of Agriculture there, it looked like they definitely had multiple nests. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, so in Europe, it's spread very rapidly year on year across the continent, as we can see from this expanding range map. And as of 2016, this expansion included ingressions into the UK. And despite various efforts to control and manage it, it's really been pretty difficult to do so, especially on mainland Europe. Now, what we might ask, though, is why the concern? Why are we making all this fuss about this particular species of hornet? When we say invasive species, it's a bit of a fuzzy term. What does it actually mean? And I always think that it means species we're aware of, they're introduced, but they do something we don't like. So maybe they cause some kind of harm or some other thing we're aware of, as opposed to species that might have been introduced, but we like them. We then, for some reason, don't consider those invasive species. But where I'm going with all of this is that there are several key impacts that Vespa velutina can have on ecosystems and on apiculture. So first of all, things to note is that they're very adaptive, effective generalist foragers. They're quite impressive, really. They can utilize all kinds of sugar sources, from fruit, much to the ire of fruit farmers, to even fizzy drinks and human food and drink, and meat sources. So in some cases, we see them feeding on carrion roadkill, but primarily what they consume are other species of insects, specifically bees, wasps, flies, things like this encompass the broad part of their diet. And that includes many pollinating insects and, of course, honeybees. Now, within the environments that they invade, especially areas where they've been established for a while, we see incredibly high nest densities. And these nests are large. They can have several thousand individuals there at once. And for example, in Galicia, where we've done some work where density is incredibly high, you look around and you're seeing these nests all over the place in the environment. So the pressure that all of this predation puts on ecosystems can be quite intense. On top of that, they can specialize on honeybees. And really, this is most likely the reason why I'm talking to you today, and the reason why, as especially a beekeeping audience, you might be interested in them as an invasive species. And what that really looks like is this. So you may have seen this video before, but you have a hornet here, she's foraging or flying in front of a hive of bees. She grabs a returning forager. She'll then bite her head off, luckily off screen for everyone, and then remove her wings, legs, and take protein-rich flight muscles back to feed the growing brood in the hornet colony. Now, as you can imagine, that creates a bit of a reaction from humans. We're not very happy about this, and it becomes this kind of epic struggle between beekeepers and other people and the hornets. And I mean, it is all quite, especially with the media hyping things up, and it gets quite dramatic. But just to take a little step to a side and say that there are real impacts, we have scientific data to back this up. So in terms of what damage the hornets create in terms of colony losses and colony health reduction, it mostly comes from the case of predation and foraging curtail in honeybees. So what we see is that as the hornets start to predate upon hives and fly out the front of the hives, it depresses the foraging activity. So the bees don't want to go out and leave because they might get eaten by a hornet, which does make sense. And the graph we see here is showing that when you get very high hornet densities, foraging effectively shuts down. We call this phenomenon foraging paralysis. And then what can happen is the hive will then die of starvation over the winter because it can't build up sufficient food stores. Now, of course, this is a sliding scale, so overall colony health reductions depending on the severity of foraging reduction and foraging paralysis. And something I find quite fascinating is this is a unique issue for Apis mellifera, the European or Western honeybee. And we see here the native range of Vespa velutina. She's flying in front of a colony of Apis cerana, the Eastern or Asian honeybee, and they shimmer when the hornet comes near, which is warning the hornet that if she gets too close, they'll ball her and then they'll kill her. Now, that's great because they've co-evolved over millions of years, so they've got this predator-prey sort of dynamic that's stable. But when the hornet moves into new areas with honeybees that have no evolutionary history of them, they're effectively naive and they can predate upon them with impunity. Okay, finally, another thing to note, it's not just honeybee colonies that can be targeted. We've done quite a lot of work in Spain. We also see that bumblebee colonies a real source of interest because, again, they have the potential nectar sources and pollen and all those smells which are very attractive to hornets, and they also have foraging bees. Although the hornets are a lot worse at catching bumblebees than they are honeybees, as we proved through multiple quite funny experiments where the hornets fail to grab hold of bees and then they fall off and go their different ways. Okay, so just a fun little exercise in terms of the diet itself. I would like to introduce you to the hornet chef, which she's a very popular recurring character in a number of talks now, but basically, just to show you how adaptable the hornets are, I'm going to show some niche protein sources that we found from molecular analyses of their diet. So a lot of work that's happening up on Streatham campus in Exeter is analysing the larval gut contents from colonies that have been destroyed to see what species we can find. So I should note really that these are very minority cases. Most of what they're eating are other wasps, bees, and flies, but here are some things that we found which I always find quite interesting. So we found mouse in their diet, we found rabbit, pigeon, bit rarer but still quite common. I think this is a shrew. I've never actually seen a live shrew, but we found shrew, at least maybe actually 2 species of shrew. Yeah, this one's really sad. I think this is almost definitely roadkill, so hedgehogs getting run over, and then in areas where the hornets are there, they'll be in and on the corpse or carcass as soon as they can. Things start to get a bit strange when we find cow, but actually this is fairly common, especially in areas where they have butchers and open air meat markets or outside dining. So if there's mince available, they'll happily grab that, or if you leave, some food or a burger or something like that, they'll go and they'll forage on that. Now this one, I think the less we say about this, the best, but that's also a fairly common occurrence. Okay, so now I guess we go on to how to deal with them. So really the only effective method of control at the moment is through destruction of the nest. They're social insects, so you have to destroy the nest and kill the queen, really, to take out a colony. Now the difficulty is, again, they're quite versatile in where they can build them. So we see here an abandoned public toilet in Jersey where a nice big nest was found. It's kind of almost a horror scene, but it's quite interesting that they choose to build it in that sheltered place. But the most common place they build nests are right at the top of very tall trees. Now trapping, especially on the continent, is one of the methods that, at least initially, is used to try and control hornet numbers, but it's generally quite ineffective because as social insects, you can kill as many workers as you want, but the queen's always laying more. So you're not truly destroying a colony unless you take out the queen herself. And of course, it also has this very bad side effect of killing all these native insects that are attracted to the same baits. In fact, in Spain, we've seen in some vineyards the case where these traps that they've made are completely full to the top with dead hornets, and then more hornets will come, pick up the dead hornets and take them back to feed their own brood. So it's this kind of interesting ecological cycle. But the downside here is that this little image at the bottom is showing the contents of your average trap from France. You see the red circle there shows that only 3 of the insects captured are actually Asian hornets. By far, the rest of them are other European hornets and other native species. So if you find a nest and it's at the top of a tree, so here's one in, I think this is in Tetbury, then the actual process of destruction itself is quite dangerous. And the reason for that is, although the hornets, I think, are quite docile when they're away from the nest, they're not normally a threat to humans. The minute you disturb the nest, something like this will happen. So they're not very happy in this case, but this is a video from John Decatur on Jersey. What we see is that they're wearing special hornet suits here, because a bee suit, the hornets can sting through that. Their sting is long enough, and so you need these extra thick hornet suits, and even then you usually need to wear a visor for face protection, because even if the hornet can't actually get at your face, they will still either spray feces or venom into your face. We're not really sure which it is that they spray into your eyes, but it's one of those two. We think it might be more likely to be feces. Either way, you don't really want that in your eyes, so they're quite difficult to deal with. And now moving more on to the current state of surveillance and monitoring. The UK has been somewhat fortunate in that we have a sea border between us and Europe. So we really kind of saw it spreading across Europe, and the government set up a monitoring plan fairly early. And this relies upon public sightings of the hornets to report them and find and destroy the nest. And it uses the Asian Hornet Watch app, which is a great app. I recommend anyone available on Android or Apple to download it. But it comes with its own limitations. Now, the main limitation, I would say, from the perspective of human reports, is that although usually if there is an Asian hornet, it will get detected, it will also get detected if there isn't an Asian hornet. And in fact, most of what we get sent to review, which has to be done manually, is the case that it's misidentified native species. Because there's a lot of things that to the untrained eye can look like an Asian hornet, especially if you haven't actually seen one before. And so this big deluge of reports comes in, and then experts have to manually validate this at the CEH and sift through which of those reports are actually an Asian hornet. Now, most of the time that's fine, but we see peaks and troughs, and I've actually had a go at this myself for a few weeks, just seeing what comes in. And it always reminds me a little bit of alien sightings, I think, because there's this story about how when there's a new blockbuster alien abduction film, they suddenly get this span of new alien reports come in. When it's Asian Hornet Week, or there's been a thing on TV about Asian hornets or anything like that, it doesn't even need to be the right Asian hornet. It could be really any hornet. We suddenly get a deluge of reports. Now, the issue there is that the burden that places on people whose job it is really to just sift through all of these. It's not really that sustainable, especially when larger amounts of reports come in. So there's a growing awareness that really there's a need for other systems to help supplement this and to help, provide a longer-term surveillance capability, which is ideally much more accurate and also automated. So this is where our particular system, which we call VespAI, comes into play. And I'll just let you have a quick look at it as an ITV News segment, which describes the system a lot more succinctly than I think I could.
Now, in the insect world, the Asian hornet is the enemy of British bees, so much so that one Asian hornet can devour 50 bees a day. So anything that protects those purveyors of pollen and producers of honey is good, right? Well, now researchers from the University of Exeter have developed artificial intelligence software which can differentiate Asian hornets from the native European variety when they land on a monitoring device. Once identified, the Asian hornets can be tracked to their nests and destroyed.
So they don't consume 50 bees a day, but that aside, very good summary. And really, this is the view from this particular system. So we have a camera mounted on a bait station looking down at a Petri dish, which is impregnated with a hornet attractant, so Vespa catch, trap it, or your own home brew. And modeled very nicely by this European hornet queen, by Vespa crabberry queen, we can see that what we did with this is we take a lot of images and then we begin to draw on the images or annotate the images to show the portions which are belonging to a hornet. And then using these annotations, we can start to train a model to identify them. So we built a fairly extensive data set initially with around 3,000 images. That's a lot higher now, but that's how we started it, with two classes of insect that we're trying to detect. So Vespa velutina, the Asian hornet, and Vespa crabro, the European hornet, but we also included a very large array of other insects that might be attracted to the bait station, but that aren't hornets. And the reason we did that, it was very important that we had a system that can discriminate between these non-target insects, the things that, as the public often misidentifies, it can ignore all of that and only detect hornets. And to do that, we also use this very standardized monitoring setup, which helped to make things a lot easier in terms of not having too much noise in the image. We then sampled images of hornets for training across various locations in the UK, Europe, and also Jersey, and then used this to train a model. Now, I'm going to be very brief about this part and not go too far into it, but effectively, deep learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, and it refers to the process or idea of having a machine or an algorithm learn something in a similar way to how a human might. So we can present one of these algorithms with many, many examples or images of a hornet and say, parameterize what you think a hornet looks like, and then when we show you a new example you haven't seen, decide if that's a hornet. The same way that I could, give all of you lots of images of hornets and say, try and learn what a hornet looks like. And the particular architecture we use is called YOLO, which stands for You Only Look Once. Effectively, it's a sort of leading edge and still is very much state-of-the-art image detection software. And the nice thing about it is it uses a fully convolutional neural network. In practice, what that means is it's really fast, it's accurate, and it's also somewhat context-aware because the presence of one thing in an image may influence that of another. And you can see an example here of these people, and it's giving you a confidence of how confident it is each of these are people and how confident it is that each of those are a tie, and it can do that all in a fraction of a second on an image. So the training process, and how we did this, we actually took the original data, we have the original images, and then we mixed them up and began to, we call it augment them, but we changed colors, we randomly crop shuffled and reblurred, and what that allowed us to do is produce a much larger set of artificial images that we could use to train a more powerful and robust model. One other thing we did is something known as copy and paste augmentation. So we effectively cut out the hornets from some images and stick them together with more or less hornets in new combinations. Here's a nice sort of parallel example. You can get some footballers and stick them in the Serengeti, or they get the animals and vice versa. And the reason this is quite a powerful tool is it allows you to remove the thing you're looking for from the background. So you're creating an algorithm that isn't using anything in the background of the image, it's only using the subject itself to make detections. And this is what that would look like for us, so we could rotate hornets and just move them all around. Okay, now for the fun part, so the results. How did the system overall perform? Well, from initial testing, what you're seeing here is the outputs. When it's presented with an image, it will label it as either Vespa velutina, the pink box, or Vespa crabro, the red box, while ignoring other things that are placed onto the image like bees and wasps. And we found that from initial testing, at least, it delivered a rough accuracy of 99.97%, so we were pretty happy. That was obviously a big improvement over less than 1%. But all of that really kind of had us a bit nervous because we were like, well, it's working very well, but we weren't exactly sure how well it was working outside of the testing cycle that we put it through. The machine might be cheating. And this is a fairly common issue that occurs, especially in machine vision, is where you're getting the right result, but something's going on in the kind of under the surface that it's using some other factor to effectively cheat. So the way we can look at this is we can actually explain and see what the machine is seeing, so to speak, by using something called layer-wise relevance propagation. It's a really nifty technique. What it does is, if you give it an image and it comes out with an output, it says, for example, that's a kitten, you can then ask it to back propagate onto the image and say which pixels are important for deciding that's a kitten. So as you see there, it is the kitten that it's using to decide it's a kitten, not any other part of that. And so to give another example, here's a very horrible passport photo of me. If I ask what's causing it to be a human, it gives that slightly horrendous answer, but it's using my face. Another option, if it was cheating, could be that it was using my clothes or it was using the background. And so we can use this just to ensure that we're really developing what we think we're developing, which obviously sounds a bit strange because it's kind of like we're driving blind to some extent. But these tools, I think, are really essential to actually ensure that when you're building a system, you're accounting for every eventuality that could be going wrong. So we did this with our VespAI system. What we find is for the yellow-legged or Asian hornet, indeed it is detecting it, but it also tells us exactly what about it that it's using. And so it's the stronger outline, but also the coloration, and specifically that top band, which I think some people have found interesting because it's, for humans at least, I find the top band to be the less distinct characteristic. For European hornets, again, it's using the coloration band pattern. Note that we also have trained it with both the European colour variant and the UK colour variant of European hornets, just to ensure that both of those do work. Okay, so that's all well and good. We have a system that seems to work really well, but how do we actually deploy that into a meaningful, monitoring system in the field? Well, first of all, we made the detection algorithm itself a lot smaller so it would run on remote processors. Specifically, we use a Raspberry Pi 4, so it's just a small kind of computer you can fit in the palm of your hand. It costs around £40 or less. And we threw together this very beautiful prototype from things we had lying around. So I think we got a squirrel baffle, we got some, I think, a standard hive board with some corrugated plastic and fruit box and some blocks. But the point of this really was to just get it up and get it running and make sure that it could be tested and validated extensively in the field when deployed in areas where we'd never tested it before and with completely different hornets. Just for scale, this is the computer that it's actually all running off next to a coffee can, so very, very small, these Pi 4 processors. So what does it do? What can it do at the moment? Obviously, the main goal of this really has been this early warning capability, so it can detect. In most cases, we're not interested in detecting Vespa crabrow, but it can detect either species, and that allows you to build either for distribution maps. So if you're interested in, from a biodiversity or conservation perspective, you want to know where Vespa crabrow are, how many there are, you can use it like that. But of course, the main usage is to see when and where Vespa velutina pops up and is detected without having to actually be there and look. We can also sample a bunch of individual attributes from hornets that visit the system, so size, shape, speed, orientation, etc. And that then adds to kind of the range of tools we have for research applications. So this was all very well and good, and we spent quite a lot of time in Jersey fiddling in sheds with squirrel baffles. I think you can see Pete there is making something out of, I'm not really sure. But anyway, this was all good, but we really knew that we needed to get to a more sort of streamlined system. So more recently, we've moved towards a much more versatile hardware model, effectively. So that's what that looks like at the moment. And really, the way this works is it's got this reservoir for the bait, so you don't need to top it up very often. You fill it up, you can hang it from a tree. It's a lot smaller. You can place it on the ground or wherever you want, and it provides this again very standardized view that allows it to detect hornets quite effectively. And it's also a lot more efficient. So it has now a kind of sleep-wake cycle. So we know, for example, Vespa velutina, they go to bed at night and they wake up in the morning. Vespa crabrow stays active usually throughout the night. So our system will then turn off at a certain time at night and then wake up again in the morning, which of course means that if it's running on a remote battery source, it will last a lot longer. On top of that, a lot of the groups we're working with, especially when they're Asian hornet teams, that they're marking hornets and using those marks to help track and work out the location of nests and get timings for individual ID. And so we need to make sure the system is very robust. You could spray paint a hornet or you can mark a hornet, it still can identify it correctly so that it's not getting confused by those kind of things. So we ensure that it's versatile from that perspective. The other, I think the big thing from usability is we've now developed, originally we were running on lines of code. Now we've developed a user interface to make it nice and friendly, which looks a bit like this. So you get a live view of images, but you can access this through your phone, computer, tablet. You just use it creates its own hotspot, which is a bit like Bluetooth, really, so quite easy to access. And it also stores all the detections from, say if you've left it out for 2 weeks and you don't really care that much other than, did you see anything? And if you did, show me what it was that you saw. We're also working at the moment on getting the fully automated alert system that pings an email or a text message to someone if they wish, if they want to leave it out in a very remote location. So beyond that, we're also incorporating some new features. And one of the things, the impetus for a lot of the additional features we're adding is that we've done quite a lot of work looking at trapping and looking at indiscriminate trapping, but also looking at selective traps and seeing what kind of impact they have. Peter Kennedy, my colleague, I'm sure many of you know, has been conducting an assessment in Cornwall recently using different types of hornet trap to see what they catch. Now, these 3 traps shown here are selective, and you're seeing that getting various types of insects. Of course, no trap is perfect. Obviously, an open bait station in many cases is always going to be preferable, with the exception of if you're queen trapping. But they're all way, way better than the completely indiscriminate, kill trap, a Vespa catch kill trap, which as you can see, just absolutely off the charts in terms of fatal bycatch. Now, the thing about this is that all of these traps, they are limited in what information they provide you, whereas some of the monitoring systems we're using now, they can give you this additional data and information as a byproduct of perhaps an applied monitoring scheme. So here's just a size distribution range for Vespa velutina and Vespa crabro. I put this together in just like a day or two by leaving the system out and allowing it to collect data. Something I'm very interested in and almost have running now is the implementation of ID tags. Now, this is to respond to a very specific need. So these are April tags. They're effectively like tiny little QR codes. You can just print them off of a printer and you can stick them on a hornet quite easily. The aim really here is to allow, especially, for example, Asian hornet team members or other people who are timing hornets to get a distance to a nest. By adding these tags to an individual hornet, it will then automatically start timing how long the hornet takes to return. So you get multiple values of distance. You can then leave that for an hour or two, have a cup of tea, rather than having to sit there with a stopwatch and a paintbrush, and then start to build up these nice, dense distance graphs. And combined then with flight direction, it should help to automate somewhat and improve the process of nest detection through tracking, or tracking down the line as it's often known. And on that note, we currently do have, I think, about I don't know how many we have now. Several of these systems deployed with the MBU in various parts of the country. I think at the moment, still in Kent, they're actually being actively used and deployed as we speak, and we get updates reasonably regularly. So the final part in terms of interaction with users is, I think, quite interesting. We've put all of the code and made it freely available on a GitHub repository, which is associated with the original publication. And we encourage anyone who's interested, you can download the system. It will run on a computer or on a Raspberry Pi or various other devices, as long as the processor on those is powerful enough to run the system. And we've had various feedback from users. And for example, this screenshot is from a guy who put it together himself and tried it out on a hornet resin block that he found on Amazon, I think, and had it working. And it's fun to see, what people are doing, what they can do, because we're making it all free, so people can put together their own systems if they're interested. Of course, the downside is that you need, some knowledge of coding in Python, and also having an appropriate hardware to go with that is also, I think, a challenge. However, this is something that we wanted to make an option. I think although we're developing our own hardware and systems to make those as user-friendly as possible, for people who just want to play around with things and who are technically able, then we have this as an option. Okay, wrapping up for the kind of final part of the talk now. You'll notice that I'm wearing Wellington boots. And I'm not just totally mental. Well, I am a bit, but that's not the only reason. So I actually, I've just come back from Cyprus this week. And this touches on the kind of forward-looking idea for where we want the system to go, where we're planning for things to go. And I didn't go there on holiday. I've been there doing research with Vespa orientalis, which is pictured here very happily tucking into some nectar in an apiary. Now, this is a species that for a while we've actually just wanted to add to the VespAI system's capability, partly as a kind of test of how versatile can we make it, how far can we actually go with it. And this is a species that's also, it's in Europe and it's close enough. So in terms of Vespa orientalis, why is that a good choice and why are we interested in that as well? Effectively, it's native to much of Southern Europe, Middle East, North Africa, and also Central Asia. But it is also a species which is, once again, as many hornets are, invasive and an issue for beekeepers. So when I say it's invasive, it's specifically in Spain, it's recently spread to, and also in Chile. And we think maybe Mexico, although there have not been any reports for a while from Mexico. But maybe where the most pressure is in Italy and Greece, where it's beginning a kind of range expansion north. So I suppose not technically invasive, but the hornets are moving into areas where there were no hornets historically, and they can then decimate bees, which again are not adapted to deal with them. The oriental hornet's quite interesting. It's very different to Vespa velutina. So here's one I filmed outside a beehive. You see, she's not trying to grab bees in the air. She's actually very interested in the hive itself. And so when we think of Vespa velutina as a sort of aerial interception approach for bees, Vespa orientalis is more like a sort of smash and grab. So she's trying to get up to that bee carpet and nip a bee off of that, or if possible, actually to get into the colony. Because unlike Vespa velutina, they will try as hard as they can to get into the colony and rob out all of the brood and nectar and bees if they possibly can. And if that happens, you end up with a situation like this, where the colony's defenses fail and it's effectively just been cleaned out by a bunch of hornets that you can see there. And this is actually a fairly common sight in areas even in Cyprus, where the bees, the Cyprian honeybees, because the hornets are native here, they have co-evolved, and the Cyprian honeybees will ball the hornets. But when the hornets make it to an area where there are no co-evolved bees, as you can imagine, it all kind of goes a bit haywire pretty quickly. So it's a species of concern, I don't think really at the moment, at least for the UK, but of course invasive species are a global issue, and we're interested in testing and expanding the VespAI system to as many potential species to make it as useful as possible. If we found something that works, we want to then make that as versatile as we can. So on the ground, when I was trying to collect training data to help build the model and train the model for this new species, it's very dry, very arid, even at this time of year. And the hornets are really mostly interested in bees at the moment. If we'd have gone earlier, I think they would be interested in attractant, but they're not really going to go to the hornet attractant we have. So the solution we had is actually to use honey-based attractant, which I think from a trapping perspective, no one will want to use because you don't want to attract honeybees to a trap. But because our system isn't a trap, we can attract hornets, and even if we do attract honeybees, it's not an issue because we're not killing any of the honeybees. And actually I have an image in a minute I can show you of them all getting along. So what we did was we collected, again, the same process, a bunch of images of this new species. We also tested the hardware extensively and made sure that we could use any new attractant with the reservoir. And then, as you see here, I then began to annotate these images, mostly on the plane, and I'm still doing that now. So we're hoping to have a working model out to expand the range of species it can look at as soon as possible. And I don't think we necessarily need to stop here with Orientalis. It's more of a kind of a test of concept. And really, I think that because there's always new invasive hornets popping up, like you read a new paper or report, almost for me, I feel like it's every few months something new pops up somewhere. Having a very versatile system that can be deployed anywhere is a good idea. So yeah, here's a case. You can see this. We're attracting honeybees as well to this, and the hornets are feeding and the bees are feeding. These Cyprian honeybees are very, very mean, as many people would say, and they usually can hold their own against the hornets. In fact, I knew it would happen. Before I went out, I said, I bet I don't get stung, never been stung by a hornet. I bet I get stung by a bee when I'm out there at some point. And lo and behold, within one day, I'd been chased and stung by a Cyprian honeybee. So they are quite ferocious. But the key point here being that we don't need to worry because we're not killing them. And a final note to touch on here is that I'm a big fan of ants. This particular ant is an endemic species in Cyprus. It's a desert ant, Cataglyphus aphrodite. And I was really fascinated to see, we have one of these. She's feeding on our detector. And then she decided to single-handedly try and fend off all the hornets, which actually was really annoying because I was trying to get the images of the hornets. But point being is that if we'd have been using a trap either full of honey or full of any attractant, we would have killed that and many, many other insects. And indeed, if we were using honey, we would have killed a lot of honeybees as well. So I think it's just kind of driving home this idea that you can monitor and you can have effective ecosystem surveillance without harming the ecosystem or the bees or really anything, or the apiary that you're working with. So I let the ant go on her merry way. She looks quite angry there. I'm sure she wasn't. She was very happy. She scurried off into the undergrowth. So I was quite pleased. And I'd just like to quickly mention that the two people pictured here who are really, really essential for this work to happen at such short notice is Alexandros, who's a professor at the University of Exeter, and Margarita, whose apiary it was and who owns many apiaries, a few of them absolutely inundated with hornets, unfortunately, but great for us. Okay, I'd just like to wrap everything up and thank the rest of the team at Exeter who's involved, especially PIs Cornwall, Juliet Osborne, and then Charles Tyler at Streatham, who does a lot of the dietary analysis work. Obviously, the projects we work on are much larger than just VespAI itself. It's really just one pillar of the larger kind of impact assessment and mitigation. Also, Andrew Corbett, who has worked a lot on initial model development. Peter Kennedy, who I'm sure you know as well, has been really involved in the project and testing and also hardware design. And Safra Pedersen, who's done much of the molecular work for dietary analyses. Finally, Mario Recca, who's a mathematician and also has worked extensively on the system. Anyone who's interested, the full paper detailing the development and usage of the system is available in Communications Biology, and it also has the GitHub link if you're interested in downloading and having a go yourself. Any other questions, you can contact me by email or on Twitter. And a very final note is for anyone who's interested, I actually brought back on the plane with me one of the monitors. So I have a little fake hornet on a stick, so if you want to have a go with it, you can. And I think also Tom Bickerdike has also bought one that they were using in Kent, which I think might be in the trade hall. It is, okay, yeah. So there are options there. And of course, if anyone else is interested in the Asian Hornet app, I always encourage people to download that. Okay, thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
What sort of timescale do you see before a commercial product may be available?
We are working with a potential supplier, and we have a blueprint design now. We're working on just ensuring that it can be manufactured as inexpensively as possible, because the original prototypes are 3D printed, which sounds great, but if you can injection mold something, that's a lot cheaper for mass production. So, I mean, I would say it's not on the scale of months, more likely on the scale of over a year, but we will keep people updated when we know, effectively.
Is there a danger that once if we get to a high level, that nobody would need to bother, so there's no point having the
So you mean if the Hornets are established, there'd be no point in it? Well, I think you can use it for other things, for example. I'm not saying that I think that this will happen, but you can use it for working with Vespa crabro for research purposes. You can use it, say you want to track a nest of hornets, because in Spain, for example, many beekeepers want to locally destroy a nest because they know that they're coming to their apiary. Yeah. So I think it's always, although like early detection is the main use that it was designed for, it's now expanding to have many, many other uses, I think.
Because one of the recordings was from 2021, did you guys use one of the early access kind of chat GPT AIs, or did you have a different version?
Okay, so ChatGPT is a large language model. So effectively, that is a model that allows you to simulate the way people, make. So you can ask it something and you'll get a sentence that is composed correctly as a response. But the AI we're using is image-based, so it's a completely different system. It's a bit annoying, isn't it, that you kind of umbrella term all these different things under AI. Really, what I should say is that we use machine vision, and I think maybe that's what I should title it instead.
You say the current detection stations are 3D printed. Are the models and plans for those available, or is it just sort of the software on the GitHub?
It's just the software at the moment. I think the main issue we have at the moment with those early systems is that we design them and we're still changing the design somewhat. As we realize various refinements and ways we can make things less expensive, but we've been working with a local 3D printing company. So the costs, I think, are not viable at the moment for someone to go and do that. I mean, they could 3D print it with their own printer, but we haven't made the image files available yet to do that. We're hoping to not release that until we have something we're happy with for everyone to use effectively.
Okay. Thank you.
Will it be possible to take those images that are submitted by the app and scan them through the software as well?
I think I see what you're saying. You're saying if you have the Asian Hornet Watch app, could you put So the answer I would give to that is you could, but I would not advise it, because the reason we can make our system as accurate as it is because it's designed around this very standardized setting. So although you probably could get the software and just take an image of a hornet on a plant or something, it hasn't been validated that way. So there are other models that have been validated to work that way, but this is not one of them. However, on the flip side, what you can do is if you're using the VespAI system and you're connected to it on your phone and you have the app there, you can instantly save images and pass them onto the Asian Hornet Watch app, and then those get sent. So it's more that way around that we see the pipeline rather than the reverse.
Are there likely to be any weather-related issues like wind or driving rain if somebody's keeping them up in a tree? Yeah, so we've quite extensively kind of done our looking into this, and one of the main reasons we switched from our original squirrel baffle design was that really loved to take off, which is not ideal. The current system can be, so we had one really fun event that happened on Jersey where we left it in someone's garden who was on holiday, and a rat came. I know a rat came because I saw the rat, and decided it wanted to have a go. It flipped the system over and tumbled it down off the edge of a rockery. And I was like, so the rat ran away. I took it back and I watched back the footage, because actually the system can work at any angle and the hornets don't care. So you wouldn't even know watching the video or watching the images back that it had actually been knocked over. So it's very robust in that respect. But what I would say is that, yeah, you probably don't want to perch it on a ledge. I'm sure there is an impact great enough to destroy it if you read it, but it is pretty robust, and you can securely attach it or weight it down if needed.